Hello, my name is Gary Schoeniger. I'm the author and course creator of the Ice House Entrepreneurship program. The project was developed through a partnership with the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation and the Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative. This webinar is recorded live at the Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City. In the first half of this presentation, I'll discuss some of the challenges we face in terms of how we currently define entrepreneurship, both from an academic as well as an economic development perspective. I will also share some of the research we have uncovered in the hopes that it may help inform your vision for encouraging and supporting entrepreneurship in whatever capacity that may be. In the second half, I will describe the Ice House Entrepreneurship program, the course content, structure, outcomes, target audience, as well as pricing and delivery options. So we all understand the entrepreneurial imperative, the need to encourage and support entrepreneurial activities at all levels of our society. Yet, how do we define entrepreneurship in a way that will enable us to accomplish this goal? In the past, entrepreneurs were often looked upon as mavericks or fringe players who bucked the system. Their abilities were largely ignored. Others looked at entrepreneurs as mythical, larger-than-life figures who were possessed with rare abilities. Their decision-making process was once thought of as a scientifically unfathomable mystery. Today, entrepreneurs have become the engines that are now driving our economies. In fact, entrepreneurs are now responsible for all net job growth. Even beyond the direct economic implications, policymakers are beginning to recognize the value and the impact of entrepreneurial thinking within all aspects of our society. Yet, while much is known about business management and the inner workings of large corporations, the entrepreneurial process is still not well understood. And this lack of understanding is limiting our ability to teach entrepreneurship in terms of efficacy, scalability, and scope. Much of our efforts are focused on high-growth entrepreneurship, a perspective that often leads to what I'll call a plan and pitch approach that looks something like this. Typically, there's a tech-centric bias. Students are encouraged to come up with ideas with obvious high-growth potential. They're asked to develop business plans, conduct in-depth market research, complete with financial projections, and investor presentations. High-growth entrepreneurship is important. Yet this plan and pitch approach does not accurately reflect the process that a typical entrepreneur undertakes. In fact, among the 600,000 or so new businesses that are created each year in the United States, less than 2% receive institutional investment at their inception. Others tend to confuse entrepreneurship with small business management. They view entrepreneurship as if a startup were simply a smaller version of a large company, and they tend to prescribe small business management rather than entrepreneurial skills. Those who express an interest in starting a business are encouraged to conduct market research, write a business plan, learn about finance and accounting, marketing and sales, legal structures, and pursue bank financing. These skills are important for managing an existing business that has customers and cash flow. Yet they're not all that helpful when it comes to the entrepreneurial process. The problem here is that entrepreneurship is not management. And while these skills are important for managing an existing business, they do not accurately reflect the process, the mindset, or the skills that enable entrepreneurs to succeed. And while the image of the high-growth entrepreneur may capture our imagination, when we look at the research, a very different picture begins to emerge. One that reveals a disconnection between what we are currently teaching and what entrepreneurs are actually doing. One study in particular, conducted by a man named Amar Bideh, finds that carefully planned venture-backed startups are by far the exception rather than the rule. Looking at hundreds of successful startups, Bideh reveals a profile that seems to defy common sense. He found that a typical company is not founded on new innovations or breakthrough technology. He found that the entrepreneurs themselves were not doing much formal planning or in-depth market research. He also found that, rather than institutional investment, the median startup capital for an Inc. 500 company was about $10,000, cobbled together from credit cards, second mortgages, friends, fools, and family. Perhaps most surprising of all, he discovered that the founders themselves had little or no experience in their chosen field. In fact, 40% had no experience at all. So when we look at this profile, it seems to defy common logic and reason. And it also perpetuates the myth of the entrepreneur as the individual possessed with rare abilities. And I would also like to point out that among the companies featured in this study were companies like Hewlett-Packard, Microsoft, Walmart, and Waste Management. We now recognize that even large established companies have what Bidet refers to as humble, improvised origins. Even entrepreneurs like Sam Walton and Bill Gates initially pursue highly uncertain niche opportunities without much capital, experience, research, or breakthrough technologies. And rather than writing business plans and pitching investors, they learn to survive through a process of opportunistic adaptation, through interaction and observation, experimentation, and adaptation, skills that are very different from those required for managing an existing business with a known product or service. To better illustrate this point, we'll borrow from a concept known as transformation theory, which was introduced by a man named Dr. George Land to describe the nature of change in any natural system. In this theory, Dr. Land suggests that there are three distinct phases of growth, which are illustrated here by the three columns. Each of these three phases is interrupted by a breakpoint, a moment in time where the rules for survival change. Phase 1 can be described as the search phase. In this phase, the system attempts to find a connection with its environment. Here, the system must learn to function in a highly uncertain environment with very limited resources. The rules for survival here include interaction and observation, experimentation and adaptation. The system is naive and it doesn't know what it doesn't know. It requires curiosity and creativity, critical thinking, and effective problem-solving skills. They also require engagement, the ability to find and synthesize knowledge, to experiment and try new things. Assuming this connection is found, the first breakpoint is reached. This is the point where the system makes a connection with its environment. It is important to point out that, as humans, the way we connect with our environment is by creating something useful. And in most cases, we measure usefulness with some form of currency. This is the essence of entrepreneurial thinking. The assumption that we can empower ourselves by creating something useful for others. This is a basic understanding of entrepreneurship that anyone can embrace. It is also a departure from the way most of us have been taught to think. It is a shift in perspective that can empower anyone, regardless of their circumstances, abilities, or chosen field. And it can be applied in any situation, from the creation of new businesses to intrapreneurship and workforce development. After all, as an entrepreneur, we connect with our environment by creating something useful. And we know whatever it is we are offering is useful when people begin to buy whatever it is we're selling. At this point, we begin to recognize that we have, in fact, developed something useful. We now have evidence that other people value whatever it is we are offering. At this point, we are beginning to understand who is buying our product or service and why. We have essentially validated our concept with evidence that an opportunity exists. And once we reach this breakpoint, the rules for survival change from experimentation to replication. The system must stop the search process and begin capitalizing on the connection it has found. This phase is governed by managerial skills that enable the system to grow by replicating the success it has discovered. This requires careful planning, processes, and procedures that are focused on replication and efficiency and improvement. The rules for survival are formulaic and often require specialized knowledge and expertise. They also require compliance and conformity, a workforce that is willing to adhere to these procedures in order for the system to grow. And this environment is much less ambiguous or uncertain, and as the system grows, the uncertainty is reduced while access to resources begins to increase. As the growth continues, a second breakpoint will eventually occur, as the environment will inevitably change. Here the growth begins to stall as a result of the changing environment as the system begins to fade into obsolescence. These changes can be brought about by new technologies, increased competition, shrinking relevance, commoditization, scarcity of resources, or regulatory changes, things that are generally beyond our control. Here again, the rules for survival change and the system must become open to innovation in response to the changing environment. Yet these systems are often entrenched, and change is often met with hubris, arrogance, and denial, the assumption of complete knowledge or a tendency to cling to old ideas while ignoring evidence that the environment has, in fact, begun to change. And if this condition persists, the system will eventually die. Ideally, the system will acknowledge the change, and a new S-curve begins as the system begins to reinvent itself. Here, the system becomes open to innovative changes and new ideas that were often rejected in Phase 2. At this stage, the system cannot afford to pursue highly uncertain niche opportunities. It must focus its efforts on large-scale initiatives that are well-planned and carefully chosen. Here, the system has enjoyed long periods of growth and now has access to substantial resources which can be used to reduce the uncertainty. They rely on the coordinated efforts of engineers and researchers, marketing and sales teams, experienced managers with industry knowledge and expertise, circumstances that are very different from Phase 1. In the past, we ignored entrepreneurs. Within a thriving industrial economy, our focus was here in Phase 2, and these were the rules for survival. We expected to work within systems that were focused on management and growth. We assumed that we would work in established organizations, and that we would be governed by policies and procedures that were designed to maximize productivity and efficiency. We assumed that we would work within a system where someone else would figure out how to create value, and we would do what we were told. And our system of education was designed to foster this mindset and develop these skills, to create a workforce that could fit within this system. Yet we now recognize that the world has changed, and many of these assumptions no longer apply. We must recognize that the rules for survival have also changed, and that it has become essential for each of us to reinvent ourselves. These are the rules for survival. They are the skills required for anyone to survive in today's rapidly changing, highly uncertain environment. Albert Einstein once said that we cannot solve problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. We need to recognize that the entrepreneurial process is different from the managerial process. We must recognize that a startup cannot be treated as a smaller version of a large corporation, and that the skills required to manage an existing business are different from those required to identify and evaluate new opportunities. We must also realize the implications of understanding and embracing an entrepreneurial mindset beyond the scope of new business creation. Entrepreneurship can simply be defined as the opportunity discovery process. The process of searching for the intersection of our individual talent, interest, and abilities and the needs of our fellow human beings. This is a simple definition that anyone can embrace. It is not a scientifically unfathomable mystery. It does not require great inventions or breakthrough technologies. It does not require formal planning and in-depth market research. It does not require access to rich relatives or venture capital investors. It does not require special talent, unique abilities, or an Ivy League MBA. Nor is it limited to startups and small business creation. Entrepreneurship begins with a mindset that exposes opportunities and ignites ambition. It's a mindset that requires curiosity and creativity, a willingness to experiment and to try new things. It's a mindset that requires critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and the ability to solve real-world problems. And it's a mindset that can empower anyone regardless of their circumstances, interest, or chosen field. In today's world, entrepreneurship is a mindset every student needs.